Dragon Prince Season 1 disappointed us when it premiered. Maybe we shouldn't be as pessimistic as we are when approaching Western animation, but in recent years, the prioritization of easy money over quality content has made us skeptical. The onslaught of lazy animation seen in Teen Titans Go, Boss Baby, Uncle Grandpa, etc. makes it difficult to trust that producers even care about what they're making anymore. Because of this, we approach new Western media cautiously. But upon hearing a head writer from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aaron Ahaz, was co-creating The Dragon Prince, we were genuinely excited about this new Netflix original.
Then the promos and trailers came out, and our tentative hopes were contested. It's no secret how hard we are on 3D animation. While there are certainly shows that do the medium justice, this wasn't it, Chief. While the premise was interesting, the visuals were so distracting that it almost didn't matter. The facial animation especially was a turnoff, and the rigid movement caused by the lower frame rate discouraged us.
So Season 1 premieres, and we're not looking forward to it, but we give it a watch anyways. At first the style is jarring, but after a few episodes you get used to it, or at least stop noticing it as much. Once you get past the obvious errors, there still isn't much that makes the use of 3D worth it in this case. There are pros and cons that need to be taken into account when deciding to make a show entirely 3D. Dragon Prince Season 1 presented us with nearly all of the cons and none of the pros. We'll expand on 2D versus 3D in a separate video, but for the intents and purposes of this discussion, we'll summarize what Dragon Prince did wrong in Season 1.
One of the main benefits of 3D animation is the potential for versatile camera angles, otherwise unachievable is what my brain wanted to say. Otherwise unachievable, or at the very least extremely difficult to recreate in 2D animation. Season 1 had a distinct lack of any compelling shot composition. Look at this fight in Hoseki no Kuni, side by side with an action sequence in The Dragon Prince. Even without any technical understanding of how animation works, anybody can see which takes full advantage of the tools at hand to make a scene really powerful.
Paired with the lack of interesting composition was the big oof, the lowered frame rate. Everyone who watched the show noticed this major flaw right away. It's particularly noticeable in the facial animation, which was, for lack of a better term, totally whack. It makes it difficult to connect with any of the dialogue when you're distracted by an out-of-sync mouth or lagging expressions.
The animators were aware of the frame rate issue because it was an intentional stylistic decision. It was a risk taken in order to compensate the kind of floaty look that 3D animation is often characterized by. They were trying something new, which is admirable, even if the result wasn't what they hoped. So when the feedback came in after Season 1, they welcomed it. Instead of getting defensive or ignoring the complaints in the name of artistic freedom,
it's a cartoon!
The creators took the criticisms to heart and made massive improvements in time for Season 2.
Beyond the visuals, Season 1 had plenty of other issues that made the show hard to get into. Writing is the most important factor of any show. We can overlook poor visuals if the story is strong. And while there was nothing particularly wrong with the writing in Season 1, it wasn't anything to write home about either. The predictable nature of the plot and the lack of depth to the characters left us bored. To be fair, this was Season 1, which leaves any show lots of room to grow after initially setting up the world and its characters, but at the time we just couldn't be certain that following seasons would expand on the setup and meet its potential. Maybe this is our pessimism showing, but we didn't expect great things going forward, and to be fair, most shows with an average to poor first season don't have a tendency to improve the way this show did. The improvement in Season 2 doesn't excuse a lackluster Season 1, but it's satisfying to see a show truly grow and take criticism well.
So let's break this down. How The Dragon Prince got significantly better. Right off the bat, the animation is remarkably stronger. Even though the lowered frame rate remained, it was fluid enough that it wasn't distracting. While it still wasn't perfect, it was more clearly an artistic decision than a jarring error as it seemed in Season 1. They also took greater advantage of the 3D medium by exploring more diverse shot compositions. The fight scenes had better rhythm, and action sequences were more immersive. In particular, the facial animations were noticeably more in sync. All in all, it's safe to say the directors listened to criticisms and succeeded in improving the show's visuals.
A big part of Season 2 centered on the lore of Zadia and the human kingdoms. In Season 1, the universe was interesting but fell flat when its depth was considered. When creating a world so different from our own, it's important to establish a rich, believable universe that includes a past, present, and potential future. Season 1 tried to introduce us to the ways and conflicts of the world, but it wasn't convincing. Immersive shows rely on show don't tell, and unfortunately, The Dragon Prince depended pretty heavily on characters just explaining what was going on. Because of this, we felt detached from the entire story, and we had no reason to care about the politics of the egg and the kingdoms and the elves and what have you. We're thrown into this world and all of these issues, but we don't really know what's going on. The conflict was there, but because of the lack of depth presented by the lore, at the end of the day, nothing really stuck.
In contrast, Season 2 gave us a whole flashback that explained necessary parts of human history that coincided with the current conflict. The past conflict involving the older cast demonstrated how the current conflict came to be. The great thing about this flashback is that it doesn't just inform the viewer about what happened, but it also reveals much about the adult cast that we weren't previously privy to. In Season 1, we knew next to nothing about the king except that he dies. Season 2, on the other hand, shows us what kind of ruler he was, what kind of father he was, and how his relationship with the protagonist impacted them as characters. Understanding the king was the key to grasping the events of the story. In Season 1, they set up all the dots, but in Season 2, they connected them.
Season 2 also gave us a deeper understanding of the magic system. Season 1 didn't do a bad job of introducing the magic, but we appreciate that Season 2 really got into how it worked and why certain races were able to connect to magic while others weren't. Since the beginning of the show, it's been apparently established that there are concrete limits to what magic can be used by whom and the extent of that magic. Season 2 challenges its own system by revealing that previously established limitations can be overcome. It's difficult to go into without spoiling anything, but the magic enhances the world and inspires more curiosity, making us hungry for Season 3.
We didn't understand the characters in Season 1. We knew Ezran liked jelly tarts and that Callum drew pictures and felt inadequate, but none of those things explained why they felt compelled to embark on this dangerous journey with their enemy to deliver the egg to a foreign hostile land. Rayla was fine as far as character motivations go, but she still lacked dimensionality as a character.
Character introductions, especially those of protagonists, are pivotal to storytelling. A good character introduction can set up the whole story seamlessly. A prime example is Avatar: The Last Airbender and how it introduces Katara, Sokka, and Aang. Sokka and Katara's interaction in the opening scene isn't particularly important at first glance until they stumble upon the iceberg, but within their argument are countless clues to their motivations and character that will be fruitfully expanded on for the rest of the show. In this short interaction, we learn that Katara is an inexperienced but eager to learn waterbender who is close with her brother, compassionate towards others, and has emotional stakes in the war. We learn Sokka is a protective brother and a non-bender warrior who shares a similar investment in the war but is less optimistic and more practical. When Aang's introduced, his character is shrouded in mystery, but we immediately understand he has a special power despite his innocent and naive nature. None of this is directly stated or explained, but rather understood through the natural repartee of the opening scene. They have effortlessly laid out the foundation for the conflict of the series, the basis of each character, and the motivations for the upcoming adventure.
The opening scenes of The Dragon Prince teach us that Callum cares about Ezran, whatever relationship they have, and that Rayla can't kill people. Ezran and Callum get a couple seconds in which Ezran wakes up because of the storm calling for Callum, and Callum tells him,
It's okay, Ezran. It's just a thunderstorm. Nothing to be afraid of. Go back to sleep.
We don't know if they're brothers or friends, or if Callum's Ezran's servant or what. Rayla's opening scene isn't awful because it at least establishes a character conflict right off the bat, but we know virtually nothing about Callum and Ezran up through the very end of the first episode. We have no idea what either of them want, so it's not very believable when the time comes for them to embark on their journey. We don't know much about the foundation of the conflict of the series except that the elves are coming to kill the king. We don't know the basis of the characters beyond Callum's love for his stepfamily and Ezran's love for jelly tarts. When it comes down to understanding their motivations for this heroic adventure, it's just not convincing because we have no reason to believe the egg or what happens to Zadia or even what happens to the human kingdoms is something that these kids are cut out to handle. It's not the worst pilot episode in the world by any means, but there are plenty of ways that it could have been handled better to create a stronger introduction to the show.
The show starts off with weak characterization and doesn't give us much in the ways of development throughout the whole season. We don't know a single relevant thing about Ezran, or how he feels about his family and being the heir to the throne. We can see the beginning of characterization in Callum, but it doesn't start off very strong. For some reason, Season 1 gave us very little to work with when it came to understanding the characters. They lacked nuance. Claudia and Soren were confusing to say the least. Their father even more so, because we couldn't tell which side he was on, or to what extent he should be perceived as a villain. The king just kind of died after being a good dad for like one line. Mystery isn't a bad thing when telling a story, but when none of the characters seem to be complete or multifaceted in any way, everything feels flat and unclear and boring.
Season 2 solidified the characters in a way that Season 1 wasn't able to. While While Ezran didn't seem like a person before, by the end of season 2, he develops a set of priorities, a sense of morality, and responsibility that was vacant previously. Callum also gets fleshed out and has quite the introspective season, coming to terms with his father's death and reevaluating his own goals, self-worth, and morals. Rayla doesn't go through much development this season, but it is satisfying to watch her struggle with her own morality as she learns to navigate more personal relationships. Claudia and Soren are bangers in this season. They're so funny and interesting and play off of each other so well that it's just... yeah. We could write a whole video about how great they are as characters, going from throwaway henchmen to these delicious little creatures, but we'll be brief for now. In this season, we see that Claudia and Soren are motivated by a desire for parental approval, but struggle with their morality as their father's demands lead them towards a darker path. Their father's motivations are entirely cleared up, where in the first season, it was painfully ambiguous. What we learn about the king is reflected in his children, and it helps us understand their motivations more thoroughly. All the holes in the characters left behind by season 1 were more than filled by season 2.
Finally, the plot. The first season had all the ingredients for a good story, but the second delved deeper to actually make the story good. In season 1, the conflict is entirely external. All we need to do is get the egg to Zadia, and that's it. In season 2, we still just need to get the egg to Zadia, but the addition of diverse internal conflicts between characters makes getting the now dragon to Zadia 1,000 times more interesting. The plot itself hasn't fundamentally changed, but it didn't have to. The Dragon Prince was already an okay show with a good setup. It just didn't have anything more than that. By elaborating on its lore, improving its animation, and developing its characters, it was able to turn itself into an excellent show.
We don't want to rail on Dragon Prince because of a mediocre season 1. Rather, we'd like to celebrate this show and its improvements. It's rare to see a show take criticisms to heart and undergo the changes it needs to overcome its faults. But Dragon Prince is a prime example of why shows shouldn't be afraid to improve.
Thanks to our patrons who support the channel so generously. A special thanks to our space explorer, Alex Stressball. If you want to help support the channel, we would love it if you would head over to our Patreon and consider donating.
While Ezran didn't seem like a person before, I forgot that line was there.